The story of the Mongol invasion of the Khwarazmian Empire begins not with armies or sieges, but with merchants on a trading mission. For in the early 13th century, the steppe empire forged by Genghis Khan had begun to open its frontiers to commerce, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. Genghis Khan, having united the fractious Mongol tribes and conquered northern China, turned his eyes westward toward the wealthy Islamic world where the Khwarazmian Empire stretched across Central Asia, encompassing Persia Transoxiana and lands that had once belonged to older caliphates and dynasties. Its ruler, Shah Ala ad-Din Muhammad II, presided over a vast realm whose cities, Samarkand, Bukhara, Urgench, were famed for their wealth, scholars, artisans, and marketplaces brimming with silks, spices, and precious metals. For Genghis Khan, the Khwarazmian state was not initially a target for conquest, but a potential partner in trade and diplomacy. In 1218, a caravan of Mongol merchants, numbering around 500 men with valuable goods, arrived at the Khwarazmian frontier city of Otrar. Instead of being welcomed, the caravan was seized by the city's governor, Inalchuk, a man notorious for both arrogance and suspicion. He accused the traders of being spies and confiscated their merchandise. News of this outrage traveled quickly to Genghis Khan, who, still inclined to maintain peaceful relations, sent 3 envoys to the Shah himself, demanding the release of the merchants and punishment for Inalchuk. But Ala ad-Din Muhammad made a fateful decision. Rather than disciplining his governor, he had one of the Mongol envoys executed, and the others mutilated, their beards burned off in humiliation. This insult was not merely a diplomatic slight, it was a challenge to Mongol honor and authority. Genghis Khan, who valued loyalty and punished betrayal with terrifying severity, now resolved upon a war of annihilation. The Mongol invasion of the Khwarazmian Empire in 1219 was not a campaign of conquest in the conventional sense. It was vengeance on a grand scale, a meticulously planned demonstration of Mongol power designed to erase an empire from the map. Genghis Khan gathered perhaps 200,000 warriors, including Mongol horse archers, heavy cavalry engineers, and allied contingents from conquered steppe peoples. Unlike many nomadic armies, the Mongols had developed sophisticated logistics, intelligence networks, and siege technologies, enabling them to strike with both speed and devastating efficiency. Before setting out, Genghis Khan divided his forces into multiple armies, each tasked with advancing along different routes into Khwarazmian territory, sowing confusion and preventing the Shah from concentrating his defenses. The first major target was the city of Otrar itself, where the insult had begun. Genghis Khan's generals laid siege to the city, employing siege engines and relentless assaults. The siege lasted for months, but when Otrar finally fell in 1219, the Mongols unleashed their fury. Inalchuk, the governor who had arrested the merchants, was captured. Different sources record his punishment in varying detail, but the most famous account says he was executed by having molten silver poured into his eyes and ears, a grotesque fate that symbolized Mongol retribution for treachery. The population of Otrar was massacred or enslaved, its walls razed, and the city reduced to rubble. The vengeance had begun. From Otrar, the Mongols fanned out toward the great cities of Transoxiana. Bukhara, a jewel of Islamic civilization, became one of the next targets. Genghis Khan himself led the army that approached Bukhara in 1220. The Mongol arrival spread panic, for their reputation preceded them. When the walls of Bukhara were breached after only a brief resistance, Genghis Khan entered the city. According to chroniclers, he addressed the citizens in the mosque, declaring that he was the scourge of God sent to punish them for their sins. The city's garrison was slaughtered, many inhabitants were enslaved, and artisans and skilled workers were deported to serve the Mongol state. Bukhara, once a center of culture and scholarship, was left in ruins. Next came Samarkand, one of the richest and most fortified cities of the region. The Shah had concentrated perhaps 40,000 soldiers there, including heavily armed cavalry and war elephants. Confident in their numbers and fortifications, the defenders believed they could withstand the Mongol onslaught. But Genghis Khan's army, numbering perhaps 50,000 in this theater, encircled the city, cut off supplies, and launched repeated assaults. Mongol engineers constructed siege engines, catapults, and battering rams, while their cavalry intercepted any attempt at relief. After a fierce battle outside the walls, in which Mongol archers showered arrows upon the defenders and elephants panicked under fire, the garrison's morale collapsed. Betrayal from within hastened the city's fall. Samarkand surrendered after only a few days. Its soldiers were executed, perhaps by being divided into units of 10, where 9 were killed and 1 spared as a warning. Tens of thousands of civilians were enslaved, deported, or massacred. The devastation shocked the Islamic world. As Mongol armies swept through Transoxiana, the Shah himself fled rather than stand and fight. Instead of rallying his forces for a decisive battle, Ala ad-Din Muhammad retreated westward, abandoning his cities and people. Pursued relentlessly by Mongol detachments, he fled into Persia, then across the Caspian Sea, before finally dying in obscurity on a small island in 1220. His flight symbolized the collapse of Khwarazmian resistance, but the Mongol vengeance did not stop with his death. Genghis Khan sent his generals Subutai and Jebe, 2 of the most brilliant commanders of the age, on a massive westward pursuit to ensure that no refuge remained for Khwarazmian remnants. Their campaign became one of the most extraordinary reconnaissance-in-force operations in history, ranging across Persia, the Caucasus, and even into the steppes of southern Russia. Along the way, they crushed every army sent against them, defeating combined Georgian and Armenian forces, outmaneuvering Kipchak steppe warriors, and humiliating the princes of Rus at the Battle of the Kalka River in 1223. This expedition spread terror across Eurasia, announcing that no frontier was beyond the reach of Mongol arms. Meanwhile, within the heart of the Khwarazmian Empire, city after city fell. Nishapur, a prosperous cultural hub, resisted fiercely, but when it was finally taken, the Mongols inflicted one of the most infamous massacres of the entire campaign. Reports say that perhaps hundreds of thousands were killed, though medieval chroniclers may have exaggerated the numbers. In one grim detail, it is said the Mongols executed the entire population to avenge the death of a Mongol commander, Tolui's son-in-law, who had fallen during the siege. The city was leveled, its ruins piled with skulls as a warning to others. Urgench, the capital of the Khwarazmian Empire, posed perhaps the greatest challenge. Located in a marshy region with strong fortifications, it resisted for months. The Mongols diverted rivers to flood parts of the city and used their engineering prowess to breach its defenses. When Urgench finally fell, the Mongols exacted an especially brutal revenge. Accounts claim that the massacre exceeded all others, with tens or even hundreds of thousands slain. The city burned, and survivors dispersed into slavery. The destruction of Urgench symbolized the end of the Khwarazmian state. By 1221, the Mongols had accomplished their goal. The Khwarazmian Empire, once a formidable power, lay shattered. Its cities were ruined, its population decimated, its ruler dead in exile. The Mongols had not only avenged the insult at Otrar, but also opened the road to Persia, the Middle East, and beyond. In the following decades, Mongol armies would strike into the heart of the Islamic world, conquering Baghdad in 1258 and challenging even the Mamluks of Egypt. But it was in Khwarazm that the Mongols perfected the methods of total war that made them the most feared force of the medieval world. The invasion of Khwarazm demonstrated the ruthless efficiency of Mongol strategy. Their armies combined mobility, intelligence, psychological warfare, and uncompromising brutality. They spread terror deliberately, using massacres as tools of psychological conquest. Cities that resisted were destroyed utterly, while those that surrendered swiftly were sometimes spared. This carrot-and-stick policy broke the will of many opponents before battles even began. The destruction of Khwarazm also revealed the consequences of misrule, for the Shah's arrogance and failure to unite his people against the invader left his empire vulnerable. In hindsight, the Mongol invasion of Khwarazm was not merely an episode of medieval warfare, but a turning point in world history. It marked the first great collision between the nomadic empire of the Mongols and the settled civilizations of the Islamic world. It redrew the political map of Central Asia, opening routes that would carry Mongol armies as far as Europe and the Middle East. It also left scars that lingered for centuries, as ruined cities struggled to recover and populations remembered the terror unleashed by Genghis Khan's horsemen. And yet, amid the devastation, the Mongol conquest also facilitated new connections. The incorporation of Central Asia into the Mongol Empire eventually created the Pax Mongolica, a period of relative stability across Eurasia that allowed trade, knowledge, and travelers like Marco Polo to move across continents. In this paradox, the invasion of Khwarazm was both an ending and a beginning, the end of one empire and the birth of a vast new order forged in fire and blood. The story of the Mongol invasion of the Khwarazmian Empire remains one of the most dramatic and brutal episodes of medieval history. It began with a caravan of merchants and ended with the destruction of an empire. It revealed the unforgiving logic of Mongol warfare, where betrayal and insult were answered with annihilation. And it showed the world that Genghis Khan was not merely a conqueror, but a force of nature, a ruler whose vengeance could erase kingdoms and whose ambition would reshape the destiny of Eurasia.